Hello, everybody. My name is Luz Maria Payan, and I am a second-year law student at Penn State Law. I am currently in the Manglona Lab for Gender and Economic Equity. For the lab's Witnesses to History project, we are capturing the personal experiences of women during a dynamic era in the United States. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming Mrs. Joyce Keel to join me. Ms. Keel is a mother, an educator, and a volunteer. Thank you for joining me, Ms. Keel.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so to kind of get started with the interview, I'd like to start by asking you to share a little bit about yourself in terms of your childhood.
I was born in a very small town in Oklahoma where my father was also born, and I am a fourth generation Oklahoman, never left the state. So I grew up in a very small, welcoming community. Everybody knew everything I was doing, and they'd report to my parents if I was not behaving. My parents are also educators, so by fifth grade, I had my father as principal, and by seventh grade, I had my mother as a reading teacher.
Oh, wow. So they were definitely involved with your upbringing.
Yeah,
Um, so I know you said you were born in Oklahoma, but can you tell me what year you were born?
born in 1948.
Okay, perfect. And then when you were growing up, who lived in the home with you?
I have one sister and one brother, and both my parents.
Okay. And I know you mentioned both of your parents were educators. Were they always educators?
No, my father worked for my grandfather in the oil and gas business for the first several years after World War II. My grandfather had saved the business so that his son and son-in-law would have work to come home to.
Okay.
He,
And I apologize. And did your mom, was she always an educator?
no, she was a stay-at-home mom till actually when I was in sixth grade, she went back to school Monday through Friday and left us at home to finish her education so that
Okay.
she could be a teacher.
Nice. So I guess kind of I want to talk a little bit about your parents. I know you mentioned your dad worked in oil and gas. Why did he go into education?
Prior to World War II, he had received his college degree in education, and that's what he always intended to do. But felt an obligation to the family when he came back to carry on with the Palm Oil Company, was the name of the business.
Okay, that makes sense. And then shifting to your mom, when she went back to school and became an educator, do you know why she made that decision?
That decision was made in 1958 or 59 after my grandfather's death.
Okay. Um, so kind of going back to, who grew up and lived in your home, I know you mentioned that you had one brother and one sister. How were the responsibilities split between you and your siblings?
You know, those early years, my brother's 5 years older than I am, and my sister's 14 months older than I am. And those early years, when my mother was home, we had very few responsibilities around the house. She pretty much took care of everything, and we had free run of the neighborhood. Um, we could leave whenever we wanted, come home whenever we wanted, home by dark. It was just a very free home, in and out experience.
Yeah. Do you think that was because of the town that you lived in where everybody knew everybody?
Yes, I do. Very different times and very different circumstances.
Yeah. So the responsibilities in terms of your parents, I know since both of them were working, how did they kind of split up those responsibilities at home?
Well, my mother was definitely the housekeeper, and my father was definitely the breadwinner. But my father also would run the vacuum sweeper in the morning. After my mother went to work, he would wake my sister and me up on Saturday morning, vacuuming the house. And so I think they split the responsibilities in the home very fairly after,
Okay,
after work.
that's nice. And then seeing your parents both working, both, splitting their responsibilities fairly, what kind of relationship did you have with your parents?
I think I had a very good relationship with them. We were a close family. We had extended family in the community as well. We always had aunts and uncles and cousins around and grandparents around. Um, I can't imagine a more Leave It to Beaver kind of life to grow up in.
Yeah, that's nice. Um, so sorry, were you gonna say something else?
No, I was just going to say the television shows of the time definitely spoke to our family.
So considering your parents were both educators, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the in the interview, but you also became an educator. Is this what you wanted to do when you were younger, growing up, before kind of you went into high school? Is that what you wanted to do?
No, actually, as a child, I thought I would be a nurse. I
Okay.
read little golden books. Nurse Nancy and Dr. Dan were very important in my early childhood. But I knew that I could work with children. I volunteered with Brownie Troop that was younger than me. I taught uh, Sunday school class to little ones. I babysat. I kept the nursery at church, those kinds of things. So I knew I could work with children, but uh, I really did not anticipate that. I
Mhm.
thought I would go to college and get a degree in speech and consider theater, but I didn't know what that was going to entail coming from a small school. So
Right, yeah. And did your parents support you, when you were younger, wanting to be a nurse or just in general pursuing higher education and getting a career?
they, we definitely had no uh, questions about whether or not we would go to college. All three of us knew we would go on to college. They did not really guide us as to where to go to college or what to study, or didn't have real strict guidelines as far as what kind of grades we would make. They were very supportive.
Yeah, that's really good. I kind of want to shift our conversation into you starting elementary school. Can you tell us when you started elementary school?
Of 1954, 5 years old. I
Okay.
didn't six until after school started.
And, considering this was elementary school, were there like extracurricular things you can do, whether it was after school or anything like that?
I played in rhythm band. That was part of our curriculum. We did have school plays. We were involved in music all the way through elementary school. Um, Rhythm band continued until fifth grade, where we were introduced to musical instruments if we wanted to join the band. And at that time, I started playing a flute. We also had something called fine arts concerts in the spring, and we were encouraged to sing solos and do readings. And I participated in all of that. I took piano lessons. Uh, didn't like piano lessons. My sister was really good, and I didn't like it. But I continued until finally they realized that, nah, this is a lost cause. So that was it for at about fifth grade when I started band.
Okay, nice. And then in terms of, that curriculum that you were talking about, were both boys and girls encouraged to do any of those activities?
Yes, all of those had to. Anything in fine arts and music, the boys were encouraged as much as the girls. Any of the activities in elementary school that were school plays or programs included both. It
Okay,
was
that's
until sixth grade we were offered the opportunity to play basketball, and of course that was the girls' team we went to.
okay. And were girls allowed to, or did girls have the opportunity to play basketball before sixth grade?
Not We didn't have any community organizations that provided sports outside of school, so it wasn't until sixth grade.
Did your school have a dress code?
No, well, not that I was ever aware of, but I looked like everybody else. So, they may have had a code that parents talked about, but not that was ever made known.
Okay. Yeah, and okay. And what was everybody wearing, what in terms of what were boys wearing and what were girls wearing?
We were wearing blue jeans, I think, as early as first grade. I
Okay.
have school pictures, and many of my first grade friends became lifelong friends, and I have pictures of them. You still see them occasionally. Um, the girls weren't wearing jeans until we were probably ninth grade. We were allowed to wear jeans on Fridays. So elementary school, we wore dresses and we wore shorts under our dresses usually, and we wore knee socks, and most of the kids wore loafers. I wore saddle Oxfords, started wearing sneakers in probably junior high.
Okay, nice. And did you enjoy wearing, dresses and skirts while you were at school?
Oh, very much. Our mother and our mother made clothes for us, and I did wear hand-me-downs. I did wear my sister's, so sometimes I would have the same outfit 2 years in a row in different colors because they often made us matching clothes.
Oh, that's really fun. Did you like matching with your sister?
I don't remember ever complaining about it, which surprises me because we're very different personalities, and I would think I would have complained, but I don't remember that.
Well, did you have a good relationship with your sister?
Yes, we always shared a bedroom, and from the time our parents built onto our house when we were 3 and 4 years old, they added a bedroom for us. Previously, the house had been two bedrooms, and we had an air conditioner in our own bedroom, which was very unusual for your house to be air conditioned, first of all, but to have one privately, that was important. And we had, my grandmother had bought us furniture and made bedspreads and curtains, and we were so proud of our new bedroom that we lived in until we were 12 and 13 years old before we moved to another house.
Oh, okay. That seems like it would have been such a fun experience, sharing a room with your sister. Did your brother, I know you mentioned you had two rooms before. Did all three of you guys share a room before that additional room was added?
I guess I was in a crib for only about 9 months. And then my sister and I were both in a rollaway bed, and my brother had a twin bed in the same bedroom.
Okay, and then did he just stay in a room by himself when you and your sister moved into the other room? Okay,
Very grateful to have a bedroom by himself.
nice. Well, I guess nice for him.
As he mentioned later in life.
That's funny. So kind of going back to childhood education, was there a mentor or someone that was significant to you while you were in elementary?
Well, I can still name every one of my teachers, and because my parents were involved in education, of course, they were their friends, their peer group were the teachers in school. But I do have one fifth grade teacher that was very instrumental in my life, and I think she took an interest in me, or I realized that she took an interest in me, not because of who I was, not because I had an older sister. And prior to that time, often I was just Janice's little sister. And so by fifth grade, that was really, maybe I was just then becoming aware of the fact that I was different.
Hmm.
But I remember that teacher particularly well.
That's nice. I think it's important to have someone that is significant while we're like, growing up and going into childhood and high school education. Um, so kind of shifting into your high school education more so, when was it that you started high school?
I started high school in 1963 and graduated in 66.
Okay, so was it a 3-year thing?
It was I guess I started in 62. The end of the year was 63. I guess I started in 62. It's
Okay.
yeah.
And I know you mentioned back in, childhood and middle school that it was until 6th grade that you were given the opportunity to play basketball. Did you play any sports when you were in high school?
Yes, I played basketball. I ran track. I was instrumental in starting our high school track program. We didn't have one, and I worked with the coach and wanted to start one, and we did. And we also continued it and had a summer AAU program in track. And
Oh,
I was a swimmer. I loved swimming. I grew up in the swimming pool, the community neighborhood swimming pool. And one summer, my parents went to summer school in Gunnison, Colorado. And so we went to Gunnison in the summer 3 different years. And the first year I went, I got to participate with a swim team, and that was really exciting for me because that was something I truly love. I'm short. I was not much of a basketball player, but I was always on the first team because I was scrappy and tall.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm glad you had those opportunities in high school. I guess since you were so involved in sports, did you always feel like you had that support from faculty and staff in being able to do all of those sports?
Yes, I did.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Outside of sports, were there other organizations that you were involved in high school?
As a member of our church organization, in YS, and I was a member of Rainbow Girls, which is a Masonic organization, and we met once a month. I joined when I was 12 and went all the way through high school.
Yeah, that's awesome. It seems like you were very involved. Um, I know you mentioned that there wasn't a dress code that you were aware of when you were in elementary. What about high school? Did you have a dress code then?
I think girls might have been sent home if their skirts were too short, but I didn't ever have that as an issue. And like I said, we did have days of the week that we were allowed to wear jeans by the time I was in high school, but it still was not our everyday dress. We still wore dresses to school most of the time and dressed up. We looked like we were ready to go anywhere. We could have gone to Sunday school or church with our
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm. And
we
and do you know how short those skirts had to be for those girls to be sent home?
had to be able to touch the bottom hem of our skirt with our fingertips. If it's
Okay.
shorter than that.
Okay. And if I got that right, you were never sent home for that. Was that
No,
right?
no,
Okay.
no. My mother and my grandmother would have made sure that hem was straight and that it was okay.
So kind of similar to when you were in elementary, was there anyone that was significant to you during your time in high school?
The year I was a freshman, we had a young teacher come, a science teacher, and he became our class sponsor. And as I became an adult, he also became a friend of my father's and a friend of mine. And I would say he probably was the most influential person.
That's good. Was there any specific reason that he became influential to you?
I think he was young, he was married, he had a young family. And during those years I was in high school, uh, his family grew from one son to three sons, and that was romantic, I guess you'd say, for a young teenager looking at possibilities for the future. And he was just very accepting. He was also the track coach, and he
Okay.
was very supportive of me in a leadership role.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really good. I know I said earlier, I think it's really important to have kind of that mentor relationship with somebody. Um, Kind of in turn shifting into more of the academic side of high school. What kind of electives were being offered that were available for you to take?
Um, Home economics I took every year. We had a very good music program with band offered um, vocal music for girls, vocal music for men, vocal mixed chorus group as well. We had speech and debate. However, speech class was not offered until your senior year in high school. But when I was in eighth grade, I expressed an interest in speech and joined the high school debate team. And
Oh,
so I worked all the way through my high school years with the speech and drama class, even though I was not taking the class. I went to competitions across the state, and that was an important part of my uh, preparation, I think, for being a teacher.
yeah, that sounds really awesome. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned that you took home economics all 4 years. Was this an elective or a requirement?
It was an elective. Uh,
Okay.
I actually got no guidance from a guidance counselor, although we had one. But I never had an appointment with a guidance counselor, which I find interesting in looking back now. But I only took one math class in high school, and that was Algebra 1. And I really consider that a very big determinant in my adult life and my choices for how to become a teacher. I learned math basically in math for elementary teachers. And I have to admit that. I've admitted that to students all through my career. But I did have typing, that was an elective. I took shorthand, that was an elective. Spanish was an elective, and I had 2 years of high school Spanish, but we had a very ineffective teacher and learned very little. I learned more when I first started teaching. I taught Spanish with a TV Spanish teacher, and I actually learned more in that experience than I retained from 2 years of high school Spanish.
Wow, that's really interesting. Um, in terms of that guidance counselor, did you not ever speak with them just because they weren't making themselves available to students, or do you know why that was?
I don't remember anyone ever speaking to them unless it was time for us to take the ACT test, and they administered the test and took care of all the security for the test materials. And I do know there were students who saw the guidance counselor as juniors and seniors because they were involved in applying for scholarships. I did have a couple of scholarships, but I don't think I got them through a guidance counselor. I think I applied for them through the university and through financial aid.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Um, when earlier you mentioned that you wanted to be a nurse when you were growing up in high school, was that still the same or did that change?
I don't think I really cared about nursing at all by the time I got to high school. I did spend many, many, many hours in junior high uh, reading a series of books about nurses and all of their life experiences. And I think maybe that must have burned me out because I don't think I ever cared about it in high school.
Yeah. So when you were in high school, what is it that you wanted? Was there anything that you wanted to kind of pursue while you were in high school?
I really thought that I would do something with public speaking and
Okay.
or theater. I thought I was going to be well prepared for that.
Mm.
I found out I wasn't, but I was well prepared in Beaver, Oklahoma.
And I know, kind of to that end, you mentioned that you were allowed to be in that speech or debate class um, earlier than it typically was offered for. Kind of going with that, did you feel that you had that support to kind of pursue doing public speaking while you were in high school?
Yes, I did, and we missed several days at school every year because of competitions around the state. And all the teachers were supportive of anyone who had extracurricular days out of the class, as far as helping them make up work or giving them assignments early.
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of want to go a little bit back to that the track coach that you mentioned about how he had children during the time that you were in high school, and it was kind of a vision for those of you who were wanting families. To that end, was there kind of an encouragement or to have families while you're when you were in high school, like after you graduated high school, or how was that?
Well, I do know that there were a couple of students who got married in high school and were not allowed to graduate with their classes.
Oh, wow.
I just think in our community, we all assumed we would get married and have a family. I just
Hmm.
that was part of our culture and part of what we expected to be doing. Although there were a few people I knew from high school who remained single, well, a few women who remained single all their lives. And, we kind of wondered why. And we just didn't assume that that would be a norm for our community. And you have to understand, in my community, there were people who grew up in town and people who grew up on farms, and we
Mm-hmm.
looked alike. We
Mm-hmm.
all the same. And so we had very little diversity, very little to compare or to prepare us for what was out there in real life.
Right. Hmm. And since this was kind of the what was expected while, in your community, was that what you wanted while you were in high school, after graduating that you would have a family and get married?
Yes, I assumed I would probably graduate from college first, which I did not. I got married in college and had them, and graduated with the babies at home.
Mhm.
Um, I did think that's what would happen, and yes, that's what I expected.
Hmm. Yeah, so I know you brought up college, so I kind of want to talk about college now. So what year did you start college?
It's at Oklahoma State University in the fall of 1966.
Okay. And what were you studying?
Golden College of Arts and Sciences in speech.
Mm. And outside of, the requirements that you had to take for that course of study, were there any electives that you chose to take that were just of interest to you?
No, I didn't have any electives my freshman or sophomore year. They were all required courses and not my style of learning or my style of studying. They were classes of 400 or 500 students, mostly lecture classes where you were expected to sit and listen and regurgitate information. It didn't work real well for me.
Yeah. And in terms of your professors, did you have a mix of men and women professors, or how was that demographic like?
They have a mix. I know I had graduate assistants for English, freshman English, probably both courses, and probably for sophomore English as graduate assistants. And in the lecture classes, I think they were graduate assistants as well. They were not full professors.
Okay, nice. And I kind of want to talk about, you mentioned earlier you getting pregnant and getting married while in school. Before that, um I know you mentioned you didn't take any electives, but were you involved in any organizations or sports while in those 2 years?
Actually, I did have an opportunity to run track my at the end of my freshman year, but I was already dating my husband and we were spending lots and lots of time together. And I was not willing to give up the freedom that I discovered in college to make
Mhm.
decisions and do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And they were just, that was the first year they were developing a women's track team at OSU.
Oh, wow. Hmm. So I kind of want to, before getting into, speaking about you and your husband, um, in terms of you mentioned the freedom that you had in college. I guess what was it about that freedom, or what freedom did you have stepping into college that you didn't have in high school?
Probably the fact that I was one of thousands rather than one of 56 in my senior class, my graduating class, was the biggest. I lived in a dorm. I didn't have anything that was unusual as far as what any other student had. Um, I did not want to go the sorority route. I took water safety instruction classes as an elective in the evenings and became a certified American Red Cross water safety instructor so that I would have a job as a lifeguard the following summer. And that was a 4 night a week. You swim for 2 or 3 hours a night and no college credit. Didn't take the place of the required PE classes. but it was something I wanted to do. I was on a work study program, so I worked 20 hours a week all the way through my freshman and sophomore years of college for the university, worked at the university.
Yeah.
And so I really didn't have time to do much as far as um, group activities went. My sister and her husband to be were both dorm counselors, and I did not want to do that because I was trying to separate my identity from my sister. And she was very successful in college and is a musician, was a vocal major, um, has had a music business and been adulthood. So I think I went away from participating in anything musically because of trying to be my own person. And I think that was a big part of my college experience was just becoming me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with me. So kind of shifting into after that, your second year of college, um, and you getting married, getting pregnant, how did you and your partner meet?
We met my first week in college. He was a sophomore and I was a freshman. And we both agreed, we knew we had an attraction. And we agreed from the very beginning that we were going to use that year to see other people and get to know who we were and who everyone else was on campus. And then we proceeded to date night after night after month.
Yeah.
So we basically didn't, even though we had agreed to do that, we didn't. And we spent a lot of time together and became engaged at the in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, and then got
Okay.
married semester at,
Okay. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you quite well. Did you say you got married the next semester?
semester break my sophomore year. Yes,
Okay.
I was 19, he was 20. He had to give parents permission.
hmm And I guess how did your parents react to you getting married at 19 during college?
Well, my sister got married in August of the same year, and then I
Okay.
got in December. So they didn't really have a way to say, no, you can't, because that's the way it went. And they were very supportive. We lived in married student housing, and we had the blessings of both my folks and his folks. So
Yeah,
we,
that's really nice. And I know when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that you also had kids while you were in college. Can you share a little bit about that?
yes, I stayed. I knew my parents wanted me to finish my education, and so I knew that I would stay in school regardless. But I really did not want to put off having a family,
hmm
and I stayed full time the rest of my sophomore year. My junior year, I had had a baby and I went to school and still worked part-time. I was no longer eligible for the work study program, but I still worked for the university in the Family Relations and Child Development Department for the dean of the college.
hmm
And um, we had a very, very wonderful babysitter who had 5 children of her own. And it was just like a built-in family for me, basically. And so I decided if I have one, I might as well have a second one because my sister and I were so close growing up, and
hmm
that's what we chose to do. And I took some courses every semester and continued to work. But then when my husband graduated, he had to go in the military. He went into the National Guard, and we moved back home with my parents, the two kids and I, for 6 months.
Okay, so I guess my question is, when did you have your second child, just to kind of get a timeline?
14 months after the first,
Okay, so at that point, I know you mentioned you were
68 and 69. Okay.
okay. Okay, and this you said your first one was when you were a junior in college, and the second one was were you a senior at that point?
No, I probably did not have enough hours to be classified as a senior yet. I probably was still a junior. I have
Okay.
my transcript to know.
You're right. And I guess I know you mentioned you had a babysitter, but when it came to just juggling your part-time work, taking classes, and your first baby, how did you balance all of that?
It's just what you did. It's what I had, and I just did it. And we didn't seem to have any problem at all figuring it out. My husband also was working for the university at the time, and that was probably the best scenario we could have had for part-time job. Uh, was to be associated with the university because they were a little more accepting and lenient with student parents. But I never had a car in college, and we did all of this with one car too. And that's different when young people look at that reality that you married and you had children and you've never owned a car. That's
Mhm.
unusual today for young women.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I guess going back to kind of taking some classes while you were in school, taking some classes while you had your baby. Um, was your husband still going full time, or did he also cut off on his workload of school?
Full time.
Okay. And did he graduate at that 4 year mark?
No, he graduated at 5.
Okay.
He's
And
made
go ahead.
and
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
majors and lost some credits. I mean, towards graduation.
Okay. Um, so what you mentioned you were working at school. What were the specific jobs that you had while you were working at school during this time that you were also having your kids?
And for the Dean of Family Relations and Child Development, as an office aide, basically, I ran the ditto machines, the mimeograph machines. I kept things for the entire department, and I ran errands, and basically it was office, meaning of office job.
Mhm. Yeah. And I know you mentioned that kind of the best scenario was that both you and your husband were working for school for the university. What kind of support did the university give you as parents and students?
Well, I don't think they actually provided any support at all, but I think they were understanding. If you had a sick child, for example, they knew you would not be able to be there. And they would allow us to adjust our schedule as needed
Mhm.
to get
Okay.
the number of hours. And the fact that I was limited to 20 hours, and for some reason, I don't know why, I don't remember that, but that was not hard to do, to
Mhm.
get 20 hours of work. So
Right. So, in how many years did you kind of complete your undergraduate degree?
when I left OSU, I had 110 hours towards 120. But by the time I decided to go back to school and go into elementary education, um, I think I got my degree, my bachelor's degree in 1971 or 72. And I should have graduated in
Okay.
72.
Mhm. And remind me again, I apologize. What was the major that you had when you first started?
When I first started, I was in speech.
Okay. And was that what you graduated with, or did you
So
change it?
I graduated with a degree in elementary education.
Okay. And you mentioned you graduated around 71, 72. What did you do after college?
I immediately started work. I started applying for jobs. I replaced a teacher in 1972 in February and finished out that year, and then went on as a full-time teacher after that in another school.
Mhm. And what specific year were you teaching?
1973 to 2003.
Okay. And I guess since you were an educator throughout those years, Some important legislation was passed, whether Title VII and Title IX that afforded women, rights in education and the workforce. Did you know that this legislation was being passed at that time?
Yes, I did.
And what were like your thoughts on those two different legislations that I mentioned?
I knew that I probably knew more about Title IX than I did about Title VII, because in Oklahoma, that sports and involvement in extracurricular activities seems to be really stressed by our legislature. But I thought it was about time and that it was only fair that women should have the opportunities, the same opportunities as guys in any field that they chose.
Mhm. Yeah, and since you were an educator at that time, did your colleagues, whether they were men or women, did they share those same sentiments?
Yes, I think for the most part they did.
Mhm. Yeah, that's nice. Um, so kind of going back to your time as an educator, um, was there a good mix of both men and women teachers?
No, primarily I taught with women.
Okay.
I
And go ahead, sorry.
good friends, a man who was a PE teacher, and I taught with him at two different schools, and a man who was a music teacher, and I taught with him at two different schools, and they had an impact on my life. I had two other men that I remember in my faculty experiences as teachers. Otherwise, it was women. Um, I dealt with a lot of student teachers, but I didn't ever have a male student teacher.
Mm,
I had all
interesting.
student teachers.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, so I guess what was your favorite thing about being a teacher throughout that time?
Well, I love children. I love people. I'm a people person. I'm a person who, one of my strengths is empathy, understanding, and I think that played a big role. But I love the fact that no year was ever the same as the previous year. And every time you got a new group of kids, you had a chance to start up. And
Mhm.
I love that. However, three of my most um, influencing years, I went from third to fourth to fifth grade with students, and and some of them went with me all the way. So there were a handful, five or six kids that I had in third and fourth and fifth grade, and that was because I really got to know them quite well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that was neat.
Yeah, I think I know when I was in elementary, not third through fifth grade, but I think I had the same teacher both fourth and fifth grade, and we all grew to love her, and I can only hope she also loved us as much as we loved her. I know we were rowdy kids. Um, so I know when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that you had started in Oklahoma City and then moved to Edmond. I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Um, what was that move just because of, just personal stuff was it more because of education?
No, my husband bought he's a CPA, and he bought into a practice in Edmond, and we moved to Edmond for business reasons. So
Okay.
he went to where he practices.
Nice. And then re where in Oklahoma City was it like the north side, south side that you were teaching?
Started in Midwest City with that February through the spring, but I generally the next 4 years was at in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Okay. And in terms of just being in Oklahoma City and in Edmond, were there any differences in, just the demographics of your students?
Definitely. Um, in Oklahoma City, they had started busing students, and so we had an ethnic mix that was much greater percentage wise than Edmond had. Um, the parent support was very different. The first school that I taught at in Edmond was a lower income area, and but that didn't mean we didn't have parent support. We had very, very strong parent support. However, in Oklahoma City, it was harder to get the parent support because they weren't living in the community. The kids were coming from across town, and parents had a difficult time uh, getting across town by the time you had PTA or whatever it happened to be. So I did see a difference there. At the same time, retrospectively, there were people who were fleeing Oklahoma City schools because of the busing and moving to Edmond. And
Mm.
did not realize that at the time that I would be perceived to have been among that group
Oh, wow.
in busing. And I was not, because I did not have any objection whatsoever to children of any ethnic group, because to me, it was part of my education too.
Right.
I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm still trying to learn about and about the differences we have and how we can accept each other. So,
Mm-hmm. Right. And for since will be uploaded for anybody that doesn't know what busing is, can you explain that?
yes, Oklahoma City Schools went under a court order, and I don't remember exactly what year, to implement a busing plan by 1971 or two, I think. And it was because this segregation was so obvious that we had schools that were black children and schools that were white. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was court ordered to alleviate that problem and to help integrate our schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think and I know you mentioned that wasn't in any way, shape, or form, the reason you went from Oklahoma City to Edmond. But I guess how did it make you feel that it seemed to other people that that was why you did move to a different district?
Well, I think basically the people who would group me with those who were fleeing Oklahoma City probably were not people who knew. And so anyone that I taught with or anyone that I had any association with, uh, and in the other capacities knew that it was not, knew why I was moving, that it was
Mm-hmm.
a business decision and a family decision to change. So,
Right. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And I think just the conversation of busing for the integration of Oklahoma schools is really important. So thank you for kind of sharing that a little bit for this interview. Um, we spoke earlier about you going back to school to get your master's degree. What year was that?
did that in the 90s. I know I was finished by 94. I don't remember if that's exactly the year I finished or not, but I know I was finished by the. So
Hmm.
I spent years going at night and one summer
Hmm.
full time.
Yeah, yeah. And then thank you for, I guess, after having been teaching, why did you decide to go back and get your master's?
Well, I thought I wanted to go into administration, and part of that is economics because I could see that there was not, Oklahoma has, we're at the bottom of the barrel as far as teacher pay goes, as far as per pupil expenditure, and that's been true since I was in school, since I was a child. So I knew that I would never make a comparable salary to my counterparts who were out in the world doing a good job. But I knew that was the only way I was going to ever get a raise was going to be to get my master's. But considering that I wanted to, I was thinking about going into administration, I knew I couldn't do that without a master's degree.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. And did you also go to Oklahoma State for your master's?
My degrees are all from the university here in Edmond, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Bachelor's, it was Central State College. Then it became Central State University. And by the time I got my master's, it was the University of Central Oklahoma. And it was all the same place.
You were there to see all the changes of it. Um, so what was a specific, I guess, um, not major, but like what was the focus of study when you went for your master's?
Elementary administration.
Okay. And were your classes, in terms of student demographics, was it a good mix of both men and women that were getting their masters in that?
Half men and half women.
So how old were your children at that point when you went back to get your master's?
Well, my son was in college. They were both out of high school. My son went directly to college, and my daughter was a professional ballet dancer for several years. So she was away from home.
Oh wow. Where was she doing professional ballet dancing?
She was all over the country. She was in Dallas. She was in St. Louis. She was in Mississippi. She was in, can't even think where. Anyway, back in Fort Worth. Then she came to Oklahoma City
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome.
when I was working on my back.
That's awesome. And your son, what did he was he studying in Oklahoma?
He was at Oklahoma State, yes.
And what did he study?
Accounting,
Nice.
father like son.
Right. Um, so I guess going back to you and your education and master's, I know there's a difference in terms of the years that you were in the schools for both bachelor's degree and master's degree. But were there since that time difference, did you see it or notice any differences into just how your education was during those two different phases of your life?
I think the biggest difference would have to be me and my attitude towards school. But of course, when I finished my bachelor's, I was into it 100% too, and was very focused and in the right field because everything came naturally to me. And
Mhm.
everything that occurred when I was working on my master's. It was just where I was supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And your husband, was he still working as a CPA at that time?
Yes,
Okay. And he was he happy to support you when you were getting your master's?
yes, he was very supportive.
Yeah, that's nice. And what I know you mentioned what year you graduated your master's from, but what did you do? Did you go back to teaching after that?
Well, I was teaching all the time. I didn't
Okay.
ever take time off. Um, I did in the 80s, I added an adult education com, uh, component to my teaching, and I directed an in-service within our district that involved 25 to 35 people each year, and it was a year-long course that was in addition to teaching classroom, and that was called Expectation and Student Achievement, and it involved pre-kindergarten through high school teachers
Hmm.
group, and that gave me an opportunity for adult interaction that I never would have had. And it gave me an opportunity to know more people in the district and more about programs throughout the district because I got to visit different schools with that program. It also allowed me to have a different focus in teaching because I could take a day off from my elementary school and go visit around the district. And that really lifted me a lot. And once I got my master's, I realized that I would have to give that program up in order to become an administrator. And I
Hmm.
wasn't willing to do it. I liked my interaction with adults there. And so I never pursued the administrator position. I didn't ever apply for it. Was in addition to my classroom work. And we
Okay.
after school, these were after school in service programs that was a monthly focus. We would have a classroom setting after school hours, and then these teachers would all go out into each other's classrooms and practice and observe how the others were performing a given set of tasks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess what I'm curious to kind of know about is I know a lot of times I see, videos or read articles about how, teaching adults is sometimes just as similar as teaching children. So I guess I want to ask you, like, what were like the major similarities and differences in terms of teaching adults and children?
The discussions and the interaction among the adults was very similar to discussion and interaction among the children, in that we had disagreements, we had different teaching styles, just like students have different learning styles, and teachers have different learning styles. Um, but the teachers were on a little different level of commitment, you might say, to what they were doing, and they could see an end to their participation in this program, where students really can't see an end to their education. It's just going to be go on and on and on. That's the way they see it. And I think being in that situation was a good model for my students, my children, because they saw that I was still learning along with the other teachers, with the other adults as well. And I think that was a good way for me to show them that we should all be lifelong learners, not just here to finish what is required today.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think, like you just said, I think it's really important that education just continues even after you finish school. I think that's the best way to continue to grow. Um, so thank you for that. I kind of want to shift our conversation into your volunteer work. I know Ms. Fox told me that and you also told me that you work at a museum. So I kind of want to talk about that now. Um, where do you volunteer?
I volunteer at the Oklahoma History Center Museum in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and what kind of drew you to begin volunteering there?
Hired in 2003, and the museum built a new facility and began a volunteer program in 2005. And I saw the announcement that they were looking for volunteers in the newspaper, and I thought that would be a perfect way for me to continue to learn and to continue to be involved with children, because I knew there were going to be children visiting that museum forever. So
Yeah.
I joined up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what were the specific kind of roles and duties that you had as a volunteer?
Well, to begin with, we had to learn a lot about Oklahoma history. We had to learn a lot about the museum itself and about the artifacts that were going to be shown at the beginning, because it was just such a huge um, change for Oklahoma history. And it was a great way to learn with other adults and to be with people who have the same philosophy of learning that I have. And basically, I give tours to school groups. I work with adult groups when a tour group comes through, for example, and would like to have a tour in the museum. I am qualified to give them a tour of the whole facility. I volunteer for a lot of special events at the History Center. We have a lot of things that are family oriented, and I'm there to, whether it's take tickets or hand out soft drinks or work with crafts with children, all of those things.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it hits the nail on the head with you saying that it was an opportunity to learn even more and to continue learning. So that's really amazing. I guess in terms of, all the things that you did, what was your favorite part of volunteering at the museum? Or what is your favorite part?
Probably just variety and the fact that I learn something every time.
Hmm.
Every time I learn something new, and that's important.
Yeah,
I'm,
that's
and I get to share my.
That's really awesome. Were there specific volunteers or workers of the museum that you typically tend to work with when you're volunteering?
I've gotten to know a lot of people through the program, but I don't specifically sign up to call them because I was a particular person.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess are you still volunteering around these times?
Yes, I'm
Yeah, it's
back.
all um yeah, so I kind of when we spoke earlier last week, you mentioned how you worked for maybe around 5 years part-time at the Oklahoma House of Representatives. Yeah, so I kind of would like to learn more about that. What year was it that you started working there?
Probably about 2010 through 2015. I'm not exactly sure about that, but it was a part-time job because the legislature's only in session
Mhm.
from January through May.
Mhm.
So during those months, sometimes I would work an 8-hour day and sometimes it would be a 12-hour
Mhm.
because the position that I had was called engrossing and enrolling bills. And that meant that we had to proofread the bills and re redo the bills if they had typos or misspelled words or whatever, um, and have them ready for the legislature the very next morning. So it stayed until whenever it was done and
Yeah.
depend on the load. But I learned a lot about Oklahoma politics and process that
Mhm.
I had never even questioned before. So it was a good job for a while.
Mhm.
I got,
Yeah,
but it was a good job.
yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I know when we spoke earlier and you told me that you did that, I thought that was really fascinating after having been an educator and volunteering and now working in the House of Representatives. That's really amazing. Um, I guess I know you mentioned that you learned a lot about the legislative process in Oklahoma that you had never, questioned before. I guess I'd like to know what is something that, caught you off guard maybe that you just didn't realize was like how things were processed.
I did not realize that there were so many deadlines. First of all, I didn't realize that there were so many requirements for specific specific steps in the process.
Yeah.
Um, Listening, we always had the audio on from the floor of the House of Representatives. It was always on in our office. I didn't realize that many of our legislators would be arguing like our children did. The classroom. That was a surprise. I, this demeanor would be more professional, more regulated, maybe was the word, I don't know. But there were a lot of tempers that flared, a lot of emotion on the floor that I didn't anticipate. That was a surprise for me.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting and thank you for sharing that. I guess if you don't mind sharing, what was, I guess, one of the most memorable things that you kind of experienced in terms of that aspect, or just something that kind of stuck with you during your time there?
Know that there's any one thing that I can specifically address. I know there were certain personalities that we came to expect to hear raised voices and challenges against another opposing oppositional point of view. But I don't think there's anything specifically I can speak to.
Yeah, that's understandable. I guess in terms of what you were just saying, where you came to be prepared for those individuals that had tempers or were in opposition. Did you ever experience anything where, something was in opposition, I guess, against you? Not necessarily in terms of a bill or the legislative process, but just like with your roles and like your experience there. Was there anything that kind of just wasn't a more, I guess, wasn't a more happy experience, I guess, is my question.
Well, of course, I was always tuned in anything that had to do with education.
Mhm.
And when I would hear the arguments and the comments that went against public education, that always caused me to sit up and listen, but also to realize that we need more voices that speak for education, for public education,
Yes.
but not anything that I can specifically say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's awesome. I know I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's really fascinating that you worked at the House of Representatives. I feel um like you said, you learned a lot about the process and seeing how things were done. Um I guess more overall, I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I guess what was your favorite thing about working in the Oklahoma House of Representatives?
Well, I became friends with a group of people I never would have had any association with. That's always a good thing. And learning about other uh, personalities and experiences, other adult women. They were all women in the office where I worked. Um, we were totally set apart from everyone else in the category. We were on a fifth floor, in a fifth floor office, and most people didn't even know there was a fifth floor.
Wow.
So that was interesting to be isolated like that. And other than that, I really don't, there's not anything politically that I gained from it, other than just knowledge that helps me understand.
Right. Yeah, well, I think regardless, that's awesome. I think the sometimes it's the most unexpected things that you get from it that are the most memorable. Um, so we talked about you being an educator, you volunteering, and working in the House of Representatives. Aside from being doing volunteer work at the museum currently, what are you doing today in these days?
Well, I am very involved in adult education, OSHA lifelong learning program, and I'm just involved as a student. I've been taking classes through that program for probably 10 or 12 years, and I generally take 3 to 5 classes, and they run from 4 weeks to 8 weeks. Uh, in the fall semester, the winter semester, and then the summer session is a little shorter. I love that because I love learning, and I've made some really good friends there. And after my husband finally retired, he's joined me in those classes, and so we do
Awesome.
that, and that's really neat. We travel. I love traveling. I spend a lot of time with my family. I have a large yard and spend a lot of time working in the yard. Basically, that's about it.
Mhm.
We're getting ready for a 2 week trip to Europe, and that's taking up a lot of my time planning.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying, I guess, what some people would say like the more smaller and little things in life, but I think they're just as enjoyable. Um, yeah, so kind of now reflecting back on your experiences and just your life in general, we started out this interview with me describing you as a mother, an educator, and a volunteer. But how would you describe yourself?
Probably exactly the same way. And I am a teacher. I've always been a teacher, and I always will be. And for several years there, I presented um, people. I felt like some of my neighborhood friends put me down for staying in the classroom when they were making more money in other jobs. And I finally could let that go and say, I am a teacher. Not I was, or I will be, but I am. That's what I do. And that's probably the best way I can describe myself. And now I could say I'm a learner because I'm doing more learning than teaching.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's really awesome and thank you for sharing that. I think educators are the backbone of this country and you guys are teaching the future generation. So, I think that's really important work. And my final question for you today, Joyce, is looking back on all that you've experienced and achieved, what makes you most proud of your younger self?
I am really proud of the fact that I was willing to pursue things that interested me, even though it was not the norm. It was not what everyone else was doing. Starting with running track and planning to become certified lifeguard instructor. And in the years I was teaching, I always looked for things I could do in the summertime that would, and I had friends who would say, why are you doing that? You know, it's vacation time. But I was always willing to go to out of state events, and I had some wonderful experiences and got lots of college hours participating in summer programs. And other people weren't willing to do that. We in Oklahoma, we had the opportunity to begin a program for nationally certified teachers, and I joined that very first group that participated in that for the state, and then encouraged a lot of other teachers to do it. And I had people who would just look at me and say, you know, I don't know why you spend your time doing that. We've got a job, we've got a salary. Why, why go this extra, do this extra? But I wanted to. That's what I wanted to do. And I'm proud that I was able to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really awesome, and I can see how proud and passionate you are of all the experiences you've been able to have. I want to thank you today for taking time out of your Friday to speak with me and share your experiences. I really do believe that your insight and everything you've shared with us will have a lasting insight on our project.
Lou, thank you. And it's been a pleasure meeting you. Glad I could help.